In this video, I'll describe methods that I've developed to help teach creative thinking to middle school and high school students. So my experience, to provide some background on my work in this area, I'm an engineer. I've worked as a production manager, an engineering manager, sales manager, quality manager, VP of information technology, a chief technology officer, and CEO and president of a chemical company. So many people would say that I've had a successful career, and the key to success is to surround yourself by people who are smarter and more creative than you are, guaranteed to work. So I've studied how naturally creative people think, and this is what I've concluded. The naturally innovative person first thinks about a previous problem and the solution to that problem, maybe something they did in the past or something they read about. Then they can think about that specific solution to the previous problem abstractly. Now they do this really subconsciously. Once they have the abstract solution, they also consider resources that are available in a new problem. They broadly consider resources. And then the abstract solutions may be combined with resources, precipitate ideas, and those ideas then become potential solutions for the new problem. What I've concluded is that this ability to think about a specific problem in abstract terms is the essence of natural creativity. So what I've done is I've developed a set of abstract principles that can be used as questions to precipitate and help people who may not be naturally creative think in this creative manner. So when I've helped people brainstorm in this way, what I've found is that they will generate 3 to 10 times the number of ideas than they would if I just sat them around a table and asked what ideas they had. To give you an example of the impact of this, I saw this commercial for the topsy-turvy tomato plant. And it first showed a guy in the garden. He's got a tomato plant, and the tomatoes are getting bigger, so it's drooping over, and insects are crawling on the tomatoes, so he has to take the time to stake up the tomato plant. And this is a lot of work. But then the topsy-turvy tomato plant is one that you hang upside down, and the tomatoes grow in this manner. Well, I looked at this and I said, this is a great example of the abstract principle of inversion. Inversion says, can you turn something upside down, inside out, do it backwards instead of forwards? I actually called one of my colleagues to share this with him. And before I could finish, he said, that's a great example of inversion. So these principles actually become a language of innovation. Now, I've written a book covering how to solve type 3 problems, and it describes the basic methods as well as a number of typical business problems that are solved. So what I've done now is I've taken those abstract principles and I've adapted them for students. So here are the principles for making something good even better. Each one of these principles has a definition. And here are the set of principles for ways to try and reduce or eliminate something bad. And again, each one of these principles has a definition. In schools today, we have subjects like reading, math, science, literature, history, and in each of those, there's curriculum, includes exercises, projects, standardized tests. And this all works well, but it's really kind of limited. There are 3 types of problems that we face in the world. A type 1 problem is inspection. I see the problem, I understand it, I know the answer, I just go do it. A type 2 problem is an engineering problem. For engineering problems, I understand the problem, I don't know the answer, but I know how to get it. There may be some calculations I have to do or some data I have to gather, but I know how to get the answer. Then a type 3 problem is an innovation problem. In this case, I may or may not fully understand the problem. If there are any solutions, they're inadequate, or there may be no solutions at all. Now, type 3 problems are the minimum of the number of problems that we face. But solution to type 3 problems often leads to breakthroughs and significant improvement. So, one thing we could do is take the principles I've developed for students and create a whole new subject area of creative thinking. And it would be taught right alongside of all the typical subjects. However, schools, teachers tell me that this is just impractical. Their curriculum's already full. They don't have the time or resources to teach a whole new course on this subject. So, an alternative that I propose is to integrate creative solving projects into existing curriculum. In this way, it would be easy to teach children how to brainstorm and how to think creatively. It would actually be a benefit and easier for teachers because we could provide projects for them to do in their existing curriculum, and they wouldn't have to take the time to create these sorts of things themselves. So here's a couple of examples. In literature, middle school students often read this book, Hatchet. And in Hatchet, a young boy, Brian, is flying north in a single-engine airplane to meet his father up in northern Canada. It's just Brian and a pilot. And the plane has a problem and it crashes. And the pilot dies and Brian is stranded in the North Woods. And he has to survive until he can be rescued. And in the book, it talks about a number of problems that Brian faces. How is he going to get food? How is he going to have shelter? How could he make fire? How could he signal where he was? And so forth. And in the book, Brian has solutions for each of these problems. Well, we could provide curriculum for a project where the students would come up with alternative creative ideas for the same problems that Brian faced. Another example would be in history classes. Here, for example, we have the Constitutional Convention. There were a number of problems that the founders faced because the Articles of Confederation had a lot of inherent problems. One of the problems was that the South wanted to count slaves for purposes of membership in the House of Representatives, and the North did not. So they compromised. That's the 3/5 rule. So for purposes of how many members in the House, they could count each slave as 3/5, and that way they wouldn't get the full benefit, which would be abusive, of slaves to take full credit for them in terms of House representation. So what other ideas could they have come up with? And there are a whole host of ideas that they could have done other than the 3/5 compromise. So my vision here is I want to make creative thinking, training, and projects available to all schools and teachers in support of existing literature and history assignments. And I'd like to do this at no cost to the school. So it would be easy and there would be no barriers to the schools adopting these kinds of creative thinking exercises. What would the impact of this be? Well, today, with the existing subjects that are taught, students learn how to solve a lot of problems. But type 3 problems are only really addressed when a student gets to the PhD level. Even bachelor's degree students focus on existing solutions to existing problems. We need a broader segment of the population to be able to think creatively if we're going to have a future in a largely competitive world faced with international competition, environmental problems, climate change, and so forth. I believe that teaching these methods to young people could have a huge impact on the future. So, vision and action plans. First, the initial actions. I want to create a website so I can distribute training videos and curriculum projects for existing literature and history studies. I want to widely contact schools and teachers to make these materials available for download from a website. and from this I'll determine the level of interest in using these materials. Then the future actions, assuming initial actions establish sufficient interest, would be to establish a not-for-profit company to develop many and distribute many more creative thinking projects. We'd provide funding for ongoing operation. There might be a small number of staff. I think we can pay teachers who have already been trained in these methods over the summer to develop more curriculum. And this would be a very economic way to do that. So I thank you for your time and attention, and I would love to hear from you to discuss these ideas. And if you would like to get involved, I'm very eager to talk to you. Thank you.